considering that I am speaking from the perspective of a researcher interested in the clean energy transition with a limited understanding of European legislation and European policy, and just reading as an interested party, I see the European Green Deal most of all as a growth strategy. And as a growth strategy, I don't think it represents a massive departure of current strategies for sustainable energy in the European Union. For example, the pillars of increasing the share of renewables in energy generation, promote energy efficiency measures, and ensure energy security are things that the European Union has been promoted for some time. However, there are a couple of things that caught my attention when I read the European Green Deal. One of them is this commitment that the European Green Deal makes, saying that fossil fuel subsidies should end. Fossil fuel subsidies in the European Union in 2018 amounted to 50 billion euros. So this is not something that can be changed easily. In fact, it requires reforming energy taxation and collecting better data about energy subsidies. But I think the drive to end harmful subsidies will have an enormous impact. Positive for the environment, but perhaps with more unclear consequences for the economy and society. Which brings me to the other eye-catching aspect of the European Green Deal, the Just Transition Mechanism, which is in essence a budget line to support fossil fuel producing regions and their workers. I think this is an explicit acknowledgement of the social and economic consequences of the energy transition and the fact that delivering clean energy will have an impact on the poorest sectors of society. Cities concentrate a lot of activities that can be associated with carbon emissions and also drive the consumption patterns that shape those emissions. So the transition to sustainable energy is not something that you can achieve by a change in technology alone. You have to attend to all the interconnected changes that have to take place at different levels and affecting industries, public services, households, and people. And cities are places where these interconnections become very visible. Cities also provide a lot of opportunities for decarbonization action. For me, there's not one single actor that can deliver the transition. An energy transition requires insights from everyone, from local governments, from private businesses, from families, from communities, from industries. So the energy transition will affect every aspect of our lives, and everybody needs to be on board. And cities are places where you can have certain mechanisms for mobilizing all those voices, to develop collective dialogues, to understand the different impacts on different groups of people, and so on. I think this question raises an important problem, which is how do we assess the needs of cities and citizens? Because we may not know what those needs are. So member states within the European Green Deal have to produce national energy and climate plans. And I wish that those plans will ensure that citizens are involved at all levels in developing future energy policies. Sometimes these plans are just open for consultation, for a public consultation period. But there are other examples of energy plans that have a really participatory approach to understanding the needs of cities and citizens. So one example is Chile's plan, Energía 2050, that involve, I think according to the plan, more than 1,000 participatory meetings across the country. It's not a perfect plan, but I think it represents a pioneering effort in its methodology, in its commitment to involve people. In a context of a country like Chile, which is highly dependent on fossil fuels, I thought that approach was very innovative and remarkable. So I believe that the energy transition depends on the involvement of citizens shaping their energy futures. The European Green Deal also has something called the European Climate Pact, which is thought to open opportunities for that citizen involvement, but in energy efficient housing, in sustainable urban mobility plans, in tree planting and greening. But energy continues to be conceptualized as a complex technical problem beyond the reach of citizens. I think to be made compatible with the needs of citizens and cities, the European Green Deal could have a bigger effort to incorporate participatory methodologies in policymaking. There are many things that could be done to support cities in the transition towards sustainable energy at different levels. However, I just want to mention one, is the recognition that cities can play a unique role in this transition, that they can help to rethink the models of energy that we are using currently in our society. So cities are not simply an area of government that national governments can deal with, but they are sources of innovation themselves. So there are many examples of municipal-led strategies to deliver energy, for example, in ideas of community energy, microgrids, and so on. But many of these innovations, they don't take a prominent role in policies like the European Green Deal. When we think about systemic change, what we are trying to express is that achieving a transition to sustainable energy will require the deep, radical change that alters different aspects of our living and also all the interconnections between those aspects. So a good example, for example, is transport. Systemic change is not simply about introducing electric cars, but rather about putting the car aside completely, improving the design of cities so that they are walkable, for example, and reimagining our lives without the car. So this means changing technologies, changing design, changing structures and infrastructures, changing regulations, changing habits, changing cultural ideas about what is desirable, changing ourselves and our environments. So urban areas are interesting in that respect. On the one hand, they are characterized by high density of interconnections, and that makes change very difficult because of the sheer accumulation of infrastructures, people, institutions, or regulations. On the other hand, that proximity means that there are resources available to make a change, and that different aspects of such change can be delivered simultaneously. So a common mistake, for example, is that what we require is a lot of coordination between all these areas of the city. I don't think that's true. I don't think systemic change depends on coordinating a lot of simultaneous actions. Instead, I think systemic change depends on finding point of entry, where a small change makes it impossible to keep the current state of affairs. COVID-19 is a good example of this. So COVID-19 has changed a lot of things that we think about ourselves, and created a situation in which many radical innovations have become possible, although its impact on sustainability is still to be seen. So from my perspective, I am convinced that microgrids and community energy could really have a game-changing effect on the energy transition. But we are still far from having a recognition of these alternative forms of infrastructure in big plans like the European Green Deal.